Nicole Scott here from Mobile Geeks, and here I am at the Grand Hyatt in Shenzhen. When I found out that MediaTek was going to be having a press event here, I booked a plane ticket and I flew over immediately. Now, if you're not that familiar with MediaTek, well, I don't blame you. Up until maybe last year, they weren't really a household name in terms of mobile phones. If you're wondering where this Taiwanese company came from, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that today. Back in 1997, MediaTek spun out from UMC, which was Taiwan's very first chipset manufacturer, and they started off making chips for home entertainment systems and optical drives primarily. They didn't get into the smartphone game until about 2004, when they approached the feature phone market a little differently than everybody else. They were selling reference designs, or basically their own SoC with the operating system included. So that means they cut out a whole layer of R&D for a lot of these companies. So they took care of all the drivers, all the little things that you would need to get an SoC working with an operating system. So by cutting out the large team of engineers, they reduced the barrier to entry into this market, allowing a lot of small players to be able to participate in the game by releasing phones with their own brand. This especially worked in regions like China, and it's probably why you haven't really heard of a company like MediaTek up until 2013, when smartphones finally overtook feature phones. Now, so the reality is it's not that easy to get manufacturers involved, especially in an ecosystem where carriers have very little control. When handsets are unsubsidized, well, the attractive, more low-cost versions, well, they have a lot more traction and they sell a lot more quickly. When you look at the Samsung Galaxy S5 or the Z2, we're looking at about $700, and the MediaTek equivalent will probably run you like 2 to 3. So we can see why they're easily gaining traction in emerging markets. So what's their problem? Why haven't we heard of them? Well, they haven't been very successful in setting up in the West. I mean, when you're known for making cheap, questionable build quality feature phones in emerging markets, it kind of might stop you from developing a brand and from developing your brand equity in high-end smartphones. Having said that, this hasn't stopped them from coming out with the world's very first 4G LTE octa-core processor, and this also hasn't stopped them from setting up shop in Qualcomm's backyard with an office in San Diego. But when you think about it, it does totally make sense. I mean, MediaTek is bigger than both Broadcom and NVIDIA when it comes to cellular and mobile devices. Now let's talk a little bit more about this octa-core processor, because it's a pretty significant piece of the puzzle when you're looking at MediaTek in a global perspective. So it has made Qualcomm think twice, I think, about where MediaTek stands, because up until now, Qualcomm's been the only one who's really had a lot of vision about how important 4G and LTE is going to be in the future. Now, on Android Authority, I found some stats by Strategy Analytics that actually talk about how Qualcomm has 66% of the 4G LTE market. MediaTek has 12%, and Intel's down there at 7%. Now, with MediaTek's distribution channels and their existing relationships with Chinese and emerging market OEMs and ODMs, it kind of makes you take pause, because this is the market that Qualcomm doesn't have, right? They are looking to get into this market, and they do have their foot in the door. Actually, Qualcomm has a relationship with China Mobile, and Qualcomm's devices with LTE are going to be pushed out through their network into China. So it's not as if Qualcomm isn't doing anything about getting into this market. All I'm saying is if you have the manufacturers on your side in this market, well, there's a reason to take notice of MediaTek. Now let me tell you about another meeting that I had here in Shenzhen. I met up with Gioni the last time I was in town, and I asked them, they actually rolled out their flagship on MediaTek, the Gioni eLife S5.5, the 5.5 millimeter thin smartphone, the world's thinnest currently. I asked them why they would choose, like when they do have Qualcomm in their portfolio, why they would choose to roll out their flagship device on MediaTek. And they explained to me the difference between working with Qualcomm and working with MediaTek. And when they're developing a new phone like the world's thinnest, and they have research and development questions about, logistically how they're going to make this happen, MediaTek will get back to them within a few hours. Qualcomm, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's into the night, but it's definitely not an instantaneous response time like there is with MediaTek. Again, just for personal interest, I asked about Intel. I'm like, oh, maybe tomorrow, right? And when you're competing in a market like Shenzhen, which is a global distribution hub, you have to know how to treat your customers. And so when you're competing with MediaTek, a company that understands customer service unlike any other chipset manufacturer out there, you have to wonder how long it is going to take them to break into the US market, especially with the kind of SIM-free attitude that may be picking up in the US. They, a little spit in the face of the carriers where they want to move away from the extreme carrier dependency that does exist in America. And I'm super sorry about that, guys, that you guys have to live in that world. I wish you could join us in the future where you just buy devices because they're fabulous, and great devices don't miss the boat, LG G2, because carriers don't want to push them forward. I mean, every reviewer on the internet was like, amazing, and it didn't really sell because the carriers weren't behind it. That's my take on it anyways. So, I'm about to head in to the MediaTek press conference and to find out what they're going to be showing today. So I'm Nicole Scott from Mobile Geeks. Be sure to check out the announcement from the MediaTek presser that's going to take place in just a few minutes. But I just thought it was worth taking the time to make a separate video for you in case you haven't really been following MediaTek and their rise to glory or something along those lines. So Nicole Scott here from Mobile Geeks. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Every subscriber helps me fly over to Shenzhen to meet with cool companies and see cool stuff.